So vacuum cleaners, within the hose part, they used to have like a little fan, and that would help kind of suck up the dust and debris or whatever, since it was closer to the end. Well, unfortunately, a number of men decided.
I knew this is where
You
it was
knew
going.
this is where it was going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's not urban legend because that would have been disappointing. This sounds very realistic.
No, it's really real. I mean, actually, I didn't even know how real it was. But so the problem with having that little fan there, and then men put their penises in there, and so then there was some havoc.
Havoc's a nice way to say it, yeah.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. Got it right this time.
Phew.
I was informed. I misspoke last time. Medical devices. We were messing around with the title at first, but this far in, I should probably have it figured out.
Well, yeah, you probably should. But so we do. I mean, we do dangerous drug cases, and we also do dangerous medical device cases. But those fall within the purview of products, and so a lot of what we talk about are other products. So not just medical devices.
Yeah.
Hence the broader title. So
it kind of goes to what we were talking about last show as well with torts and just how kind of open that term is, and then mass torts is just mass amount of clients or victims of those cases, but it can really be any type of case.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, not the other thing, but a thing. There's lots of things. Really, what we're talking about on this podcast is even broader than products. I think it's interesting just to see what's happening in the news, different types of lawsuits. We've talked about some medical malpractice type of situations, particularly like within the realm of the cosmetic cases or the cosmetic surgery cases. Some of those obviously do involve products. Some of them it's a tort, medical malpractice, but it may or may not involve a product. So really, we want to talk about anything that's interesting out in the legal sphere. If it's not something that we particularly handle, we probably can find you somebody who does handle it if it's something we're good about that.
That's true. And I think for me, the most interesting cases generally, or at least when we're discussing them, is a lot of the recalls, because those are things that I think a lot of people don't realize or you just don't hear about.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I don't really watch the news very often, to be fair. I don't believe in structured news organizations, but
wow, I didn't know that.
Well, there was this one video. I mean, I don't know if it was a long time ago, and there was a bunch of different news stations, and you can look it up. Maybe Fern can throw in a link of it, but it was essentially all of them were saying how fake news is going around and how their news station is dedicated to giving you the cold, hard facts, the real stuff. And it shows like one clip of, some news anchors doing it. Oh, out here in El Paso, we value true factual evidence. And then it starts popping up of all of these different news stations, local news stations that, across the entire country. And it's like 30 or 40 different stations all reading the exact same script, word for word. And, it says Albuquerque, El Paso, Tucson, New York, all these different places. And all of them have the exact same script. The only thing difference is the location of where they're at.
Well, but to be fair, they should all value accurate reporting. And I mean, it sounds like a generic thing, whether that is in practice.
No, 100%. I mean, I believe in true and factual information. Yeah, I don't believe, obviously fake news is bad, but you also don't want 100+ news organizations being fed the exact same script.
Yeah, so it's very sus.
And especially when it's local. I think there's some study out there too. Like all of news stations are owned by like 4 parent companies.
No, that's true.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I can't even believe that. And I feel like that's like something that, it kind of gets brushed under the rug. People don't really think about it. Anyways, that's why I'm a conspiracy theorist against mainstream media.
News, okay, all right, great. So I guess I'll be the one who will be scouring the news for hot topics for us to discuss.
Yeah. Well, and getting back onto topic, I feel like a lot of these recalls, even the crazy ones, like the strawberries causing hepatitis, like that's something that's so insane and scary. That can, affect really anyone that shops at those locations. Kirkland was one of those brands,
Right.
Trader Joe's. So just kind of finding out about that and being a little bit more aware and keeping your eye out is.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring up the recalls as kind of an area of your interest because I was putting together some information for next week's, and I didn't think we would be able to squeeze it into this week. I have some really hot stuff to talk about. And one of the things that I saw in the news is that this quarter there have been more recalls than ever before in history. So it's been, so the first quarter of this year has been, well, no, actually. It's the second quarter.
Yeah.
I got to get on track here. So the second quarter of this year, there's been more recalls. So I thought we would talk about that next time, just what kinds of recalls, you know, what areas have really increased in recalls. There's a lot of auto.
Yeah.
A lot of auto issues, as usual, and some others. And I didn't get really too in-depth with it yet since I was planning on talking about that next week. So that'll be something to look forward to. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about in conjunction with that is just, how, again, some tips of how to find out if products have been recalled. Because there's, it's just most people don't know when something's been recalled. It may be, their vehicle, products in their home, that sort of thing. So
Yeah, and unless there's like some massive issue that happens, right? Like I remember the air fryer. Unless my air
that's
fryer's
not
exploding, I don't know what exactly was going on with them, but the craziest thing I can think of is an air fryer exploding or something like that. That's really grabs your attention. I'm not going to automatically think, oh, I should go check all of my different products. And last week we were talking about the detergent.
The dishwasher pods.
Yeah, the dishwasher
Exploding
pods.
pods.
Exactly. I wouldn't have even thought about that.
Yeah.
It's always good to have kind of those sources available.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's something, a little teaser for next episode.
Yeah, I already have questions, but I'm going to hold back.
Control yourself.
But I guess that's pretty much a good segue into kind of what's been going on this last week. Interesting cases in the news.
Okay. Well, an interesting case for me. I'm actually on this no sugar thing right now, so anything that talks about sweet stuff draws my attention. And apparently, there's been a big salmonella outbreak linked to raw cookie dough, and people eat raw cookie dough.
Yeah, that's delicious. I don't blame them. That was like my favorite dessert as a kid.
Did I let you eat that?
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever we made cookies a little bit, or if you go to, get ice cream, cookie dough ice cream.
Right. Yeah.
Delicious.
Well, so the problem with it is that eggs and raw flour, both ingredients in cookie dough, can be a carrier of salmonella, which can be really dangerous. And so that's what's happened. It's apparently about 18 people across 6 states have become pretty ill. 2 people have been hospitalized. And so it just it's been a reminder. The CDC is saying, guys, stop eating raw cookie dough. Wait till it's cooked.
Yeah.
And so it's always just good for a reminder. Most of the cases that the story is talking about happened as a result of raw cookie dough from Papa Murphy's Take and Bake Pizza. And so apparently with the Take and Bake Pizza, they also have Take and Bake chocolate chip cookies.
Nice.
Right. So then you take the cookie dough home and you're supposed to cook it, but people are apparently just wolfing it down and not even baking it.
Slamming the whole bucket. Not even a second thought.
Pretty much. So again, a really, really bad idea to do that. There are forms of cookie dough that are safe to eat, that are specifically made to eat. And what the reason that those are safe is that they can use heat-treated flour and either no eggs or pasteurized eggs.
Yeah, see, that just doesn't sound as good, though. It's like kind of the adrenaline rush of, I might get
danger,
sick.
the risk of
This might
death.
kill me. That's like the best part of it.
But did you ever really think it might kill you?
No, but
Or is this news to
it was something that, when you're eating it, you're like, I really have to savor this bite because I shouldn't be eating this, and every time you're like, wow, I should cut myself off. I might get sick here. Each bite is the last bite, but then you end up going through half of it. But we've made it here.
Yeah, I had no idea. But so just a quick shout out because you talked about the ice cream. And so, and like Ben and Jerry's was an example here where they use the heat-treated flours and heat-treated flour. Just one flour, not flowers, and pasteurized eggs in their cookie dough ice cream. So that is safe to eat. And then also there's a company, I don't know if you've heard of this, it's called Dope. It's
Yeah, it's like they sell raw cookie dough that you can just eat.
edible cookie dough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it's a really cool organization. I think they were on Shark Tank, and then they were a sponsor of the She Recovers conference that was in Miami. So just a really good company, and they can ship you cookie dough that is safe to eat. So all is not lost.
Yeah.
You do not have to give up this sweet treat.
Unfortunately, not sponsored. I'd say if we're going to be recommending specific brands here, we should be getting a little kickback.
I know we've actually talked about Ben and Jerry's and Dope, and so maybe they'll just send us some for our own consumption. Who knows?
That would be nice.
It could happen.
Nice.
It could happen.
On that topic, though, salmonella, I mean, I don't really know much about it. This might be a dumb question, but I hear, obviously, the most common risk of it is cookie dough, but also when you eat raw chicken, right, you have risk of getting salmonella. And is that something that it's just, whenever you eat raw products, there's a chance of that? Or does it have something to do with the product itself that will make it more likely?
Well, so salmonella, so some eggs, I mean, not all eggs have salmonella, but some of them could, and unpasteurized eggs are higher at risk. And so the two most common ones are like E. coli and salmonella, and then different ones are more like E. coli is more with meats. You tend to see it, and again, not all meats are going to have that.
Well, so they have it. So the chicken or the egg it already has a salmonella. There's, and if you eat it, then you get salmonella. But if you cook it, then it gets rid of it.
Right, you can, but not all chicken has salmonella.
Okay, see, that was kind of my
it's
question.
Only certain, but there's a higher risk. And then to make sure that whatever product you're eating does not have salmonella or E. coli, you need to cook it.
And so with it was talking about a specific brand of the cookie dough. Did they just get unlucky and a ton of their eggs had salmonella?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it could have been the flour, it could have been the eggs, but the cookie dough apparently, did have salmonella, and so people ate it without cooking it, and there you go. 9 of them with that specific.
And how bad can that get?
Well, it can get pretty bad. Generally you have like diarrhea, gastric issues. Oftentimes people do recover from it. Oftentimes you're treated with antibiotics. The problem is that if somebody is, has any comorbidities, has a compromised immune system, they can get really, really sick. Mm-hmm. And I mean, ultimately, if you get sick enough, you could die if the antibiotics don't take care of it. So not super high risk for the average person, but you're going to feel like crap for a few days. May need medical treatment, antibiotics, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So not something you want to mess with.
Definitely a pretty big inconvenience, if anything.
Yeah, a lot of toilet paper and bathroom time and all of that. Although, you like to live risky. I mean, you're like to take...
that's what makes it, like I said, that's what makes the cookie dough so good. Which brand is it? Maybe I got to look for it next time I'm in the supermarket.
I'm not even going to tell you now. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Well, and how many people did you say?
Well, as of the time of the article, there had been 18 people who actually had reported it. So there could have been, significantly more people, but they were aware of 18 people, and they've actually put out, announced that they should not, if you've purchased this product, and again, it was Papa Murphy's, that you should not use it, you should dispose of it, and they're no longer selling it.
Really?
So, people can't be trusted not to eat it raw. They just can't have it. That's the deal.
Yeah, they got to ruin it for all of us.
Exactly. Damn. Well, actually, you would have been one of the culprits, it sounds like.
Well, and I feel like obviously salmonella can get bad, but it would be one of those things where I would just be like, wow, I feel like shit. Maybe I got a little sick. Maybe I got the flu or something. And would kind of just try to power through it. I'm curious if these cases got bad enough to where they had to go to the hospital and they're like, oh, what's going on with these people?
Well, actually, it said 2 of the cases did involve hospitalizations, and it didn't say how severe it was or how long they were hospitalized or if they no deaths to date that we know about.
Oh, thank God.
So,
that would be a tragedy.
Cookie dough
causing
cookie dough
death.
Killed you, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that's kind of like one of the only things I'd be willing to trade.
What?
Like, if you gotta sacrifice yourself, if you're gonna eat a meal and it's gonna be your last meal,
death by cookie dough.
It's like when you're in death row. So what's your last meal? Cookie dough.
Well, what the hell at that point?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. You could just eat a whole bucket of it and.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories about death row, like interesting meals that they asked. One of it was he requested to, I forgot what it was. I think it was like a surf and turf, steak and lobster.
Yeah.
But he requested to watch the full Lord of the Rings trilogy.
While he ate?
Yeah, while he ate. And they okayed it. They said, all right. But one of the reasons, because it's at the time, it was like the longest trilogy ever. I mean, it's like, 9 hours. Each one's like 2-3 hours at least. And there's like 3 of them, I think.
Your meal would be developing E. coli by the time.
Well, I mean, he just, slowly ate. And then, he bought himself an extra few hours. Can't blame him.
Wow. It's actually one of the things I used to do all the time, and I think even Peter thought this was really strange, is, I would eat something, and I'd be like, wow, this is delicious. This is going to be on my last meal. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, if I'm ever on death row and I have to pick a last meal, it's better to plan early. You don't want to have you have to at spur of the moment, come up with what your menu is. So I'm always like, okay, that would be on the menu. And it's going to be a chocolate souffle for dessert. And then there've been different things depending on what my tastes have been over the years. The main courses changed. Oftentimes there's been like crab stuffed lobster on there.
Yeah.
But then I had this fabulous pasta that had lobster and tomatoes and tarragon. I'm going to try to recreate that.
Those are some pretty bougie meals. Most people are asking for like burger and fries. Ooh, I would like a pasta with a shrimp flown in from Italy, please. And thank you.
It's my last meal. It's going to be like fucking fabulous. I'm not just going to have like McDonald's or some crap
fair.
like that. I don't know.
I mean, don't knock McDonald's, all right? Their new burgers, Big Mac,
it's different.
fantastic. Yeah, they changed up their burger patties, just the patties. Same recipe, same Big Mac sauce. Calm down, it's okay. Now you're a little worried, Big
I
Mac
don't
sauce.
even know the last time I've had a Big Mac. I mean, I don't know, 20, 30 years. Honestly, I don't even think that I've eaten at McDonald's since I stopped buying you Happy Meals,
Yeah, well, you're missing out.
apparently.
You're missing out. There's nothing like a nice, just like late night. It's like 10, 11 p.m. Everywhere's closed. You're starving. You don't want to cook. You're lazy. And you're like, you know what? Just drive to McDonald's number 7, 2 cheeseburgers, large fries, maybe Diet DP on the side. That's a good night.
All right, well.
That is a good night.
I have to call you out on this, though, that you're not doing any driving to McDonald's. You're calling Uber Eats for McDonald's.
A little bit of both, a little bit of both. Sometimes I got to get out of the house, get some air,
Okay.
put down the window.
Some of that 110-degree nighttime air in Phoenix.
Yeah, it is. It is miserable.
Yeah.
But we should probably get back
Okay, we
on
should really
topic
talk
here.
about stuff.
Yeah.
All right,
What else has been going on this last week?
Okay. Well, so another thing that was in the news that I thought was really interesting, and it kind of actually took me down a bit of a rabbit hole. Was a report of a number of tainted sexual enhancement products. And so a big warning going out to people who might be using those products, that they include undeclared, actually, products that are in drugs.
Yeah.
And the reason that this kind of got me off onto a whole tangent is the fact that these are considered dietary supplements.
Yeah.
And so dietary supplements are not regulated in the same way that drugs or even food is. Mm-hmm. And so these things, basically, it's all, the FDA doesn't clear anything. They don't take a look at it at all. Basically, the companies put it out there, and then if there's complaints about problems, then the FDA will investigate. If somebody makes a complaint, and then they'll actually test it and find out if there's things going on.
So that's any dietary supplement.
Any dietary
Just
supplement.
Throw them on the shelves.
Yeah.
No one's taking any oversight there.
Right.
That is
basically
insane.
Not initially. Now there's regulations. I mean, they have to list all of the ingredients in the product. Mm-hmm. But again, until they get busted, and it turns out that that they didn't declare something, we find out about it, then they can get away with it. And this one, it was actually kind of interesting because, I mean, there's, I don't even know how many, there was like 411 products that they specifically did ultimately test and find out that they included things that should not be in there, basically drugs and other things that can interact with your any medications you're on, and basically, just super risky for you. So there's a bunch of them, and obviously there's 411. But if you do use any of these sexual enhancement products, you might want to take a look at that list.
Yeah, well, I've seen, I mean, when you go to the gas station, you go to Circle K, you're checking out, you got your sugar-free Red Bull, maybe a bag of chips, and you look to your right, and they have like a full pharmacy at the front counter. And I mean, some of the names on these are just absolutely insane. Rhino pills, energy boosters, all this, insanity here.
I've never noticed these.
They're every gas station.
Are you serious?
Yes,
Oh
yeah.
my God, I had no idea. Well, because I was looking through this, and some of them, Platinum 69,000, Rhino 69.
Yeah, rhino pills, yeah.
You've seen
That's
the
a
rhinos. And Hard Steel 300,000 or 300K.
No, these are all like gas station pills. And I always think to myself, I'm like, who on God's earth is like, maybe on their way to work, on their way home? And
I don't think they're on their way to work, I hope.
It's like when you walk past a candy aisle and you just grab a Snickers. You're like, what it's $3. Throw it in there. And they're probably sitting at the counter and they're like, oh, well, might as well just throw some of these in. You never know. You never know.
Some of these names, like there's American Bankster, Black Label Optimum Formula 4000.
I think that's good. There's a long list.
Hard AF.
I'm looking over here. There's a long list.
Okay, well, then the one that really kind of jumped out to me was Kangaroo Intense Alpha 3000 because, I really like kangaroos these days coming back from Australia. I got to pet the kangaroos. It was all fun and games. But anyway, I had no idea that these things were just right out there. I thought you would have to go to some particular drugstore or something, or I don't know, sex store. These things are at Circle K. I just never noticed.
Yeah, I don't think QT. You're probably more of a QT person.
Well, I am. So where are you seeing them? What's
Circle K? Circle K, 7-Eleven. QT is a little higher class when it comes to gas stations. If you go in their bathrooms, whenever you're on a road trip, quick tip, and you need a bathroom break, look up Quick Trip. That is the best bathrooms you're going to find. Easy access, 24 hours. That's a little side note there. But with so many brands getting caught in this area, is it like an umbrella parent company putting all of these out?
No, these are lots of different companies. But again, I think you're going to find that in any kind of dietary supplements. There's a lot of things too, like for bodybuilders. And I know at the health stores that you've gone to those before.
Yeah.
There's tons of those. And again, that's a dietary supplement and God knows what's in there.
Yeah.
But until somebody complains about it, has a heart attack, has some issue, then the FDA doesn't actually test the thing and take a look at it and see if there are violations. So it's, with any type of dietary supplement, it's really important that you talk to your doctor before using it because, you might be on some medication and just the products, even if they are completely honest and they have disclosed all of the ingredients, those ingredients still could interact with some medications or other vitamins or supplements that you're taking. So good idea to talk to your doctor. And again, you don't know that they've listed all of them. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit risky to do that. I don't have any other tips for enhancing your sexual prowess without these things.
Well, that's insane that I had no idea that the regulation on these were so lax of dietary supplements in general because you're right, I've been to GNC, when I was getting into the gym and I was like, all right, what do I need? You got to pick up protein powder, creatine, but then you look in some of the other aisles and you're like, how could I speed up the process? And obviously the guy runs up to you, how can I help you? And they're trying to give you everything they can. But the options are insane, and with just some insane promises or expectations out there.
Well, pictures of these bulging crazy muscles.
Yeah, and it's always funny too. Even online, I'll see a lot of these advertisements for meal prepping kits or just the meals that you can buy, and they just have a picture of Bradley Martin, who's just an absolutely massive, roided out guy. He's a great guy, great personality from what I can tell, but he is just insanely just ripped and clearly on steroids. So, they're using that to market,
a meal?
Yeah, like a meal kit plan. It's for some reason, I don't think
a little skeptical.
I don't think these low calorie, high protein meals are doing what they're trying to give on that they're doing.
A little bit of false advertising there, for
little
sure.
Bit, a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Yeah, so again, unless there's an adverse event report or a complaint, really the FDA doesn't get involved in that. Mm-hmm. Healthcare providers can make reports, obviously, any consumers. Yeah. But yeah, if you've used any of these products and you have had issues, really good idea to make a report because again, then at that point, then they will investigate and hopefully, if there's problems, they can alert other people who've used the product, and then the company will have to amend their ways.
Yeah, and I think So obviously these are some kind of like fringe cases here. These are the extreme of the dietary supplements where, a majority of people aren't even thinking about taking these. But when you go to the grocery store and there's the dietary supplements aisle, and I mean, it has everything. You can get iron, you can get B12, your fish oil pills, all of that. So all of those kind of general nutrients that people might be using to fill in, those are all under there, very little regulation.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing. And the thing about that too is, I mean, I actually kind of fell prey to this too, because at one point I was like, oh, I need calcium and D3, and I guess I kind of misread. I thought, well, if one was good, two was better. Anyway, I ended up like with almost a toxic level of D3, and it sounded like such an innocent thing. It was going to help me, strengthen my bones, blah blah. And you got to be careful with those things, because even just a vitamin like calcium, too much calcium can cause cardiac issues these days. Talk to your doctor before you just start taking these things. I mean, it sounds great. You think vitamins are harmless, but they really can be problematic. In fact, back to the that we had talked about the denture cream cases, and that was where people had zinc poisoning. I mean, if you start pounding zinc supplements, the same thing could happen to you. So there really are some bad side effects of these kind of innocent-sounding vitamins. So.
And it's kind of scary, because I feel like, I've taken like the vitamin D and stuff here and there. I don't take anything now, but I was like feeling like, oh wow, I'm being healthier. I'm helping my body.
Exactly.
My body needs this. I'm lacking nutrients.
Yeah.
But knowing the kind of lax regulation there makes it a little bit more scary. And like you said, you can easily take too much.
Yeah, or just the wrong things. And depending on your health history, there might be certain things that are not good for you to take.
Yeah.
So definitely talk to your doctor. I actually am working with an integrative medicine doctor these days. And so I do take some supplements, but they're, very specific ones that he has recommended based on my blood work, really extensive blood work. And then also from a particular company that, that he's very comfortable, is very reputable, and it lists the ingredients and doesn't slide other things in there that shouldn't be there.
Kind of speaking of, almost regulatory loopholes, is I was seeing recently how there's a lot of companies making like almost synthetic marijuana and like synthetic mushrooms and whatnot. And I don't know how it exactly works. It's kind of similar to the vapes, how like there's just like no real oversight, and it only comes up once there's complaints. And so like people are getting like, CBD, but it's like the extract of THC, and it's essentially just over the counter weed without, needing the card or anything like that. And same thing with mushrooms, where they're just like getting the extract and they're saying it's just like, it doesn't do anything, but in reality it's actually.
It does, like the psilocybin stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't heard about that. That's interesting.
But I mean, same thing with kind of the vapes, there's no regulation there. There's a lot of times there's just some insanely bad built, plastic right on the heater. The likelihood of getting those toxic chemicals is even higher.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are some, certainly some regulations on that now with all the flavoring stuff and the things that are being marketed to children, and, a little bit more. But again, that kind of came about with complaints and issues and problems.
Well, and what was happening too is like the first one was Juul, which was like back when I was in high school. That was a while ago.
Yeah, lots of litigation on that.
Yeah, but so what happened was like they just started doing, because a lot of it is overseas companies like sending them over. And a lot of them are kind of just doing like almost shell companies, where they'll like start one brand, and then as soon as they get taken down, they just change out the logo, and it's like the exact same device, but the logo is different, and kind of just keep it going.
Yeah, just kind of one step ahead, huh?
Yeah.
Crazy. Well, not surprising though.
No.
Again, another thing with big bucks involved, so they're gonna.
Well, that's interesting though. That is interesting, and something that I didn't know. So I'm kind of curious to see what other kind of recalls in dietary supplement area will be coming out. I'm sure maybe next week when you talk about the highest recalls in ever in history. I'm sure.
Well, I don't know about ever in history, but there were more this quarter than there have been. So number wise, and I'm not quite sure exactly all the areas, but we'll dive into that and maybe look a little bit more at dietary supplements. I hadn't really. I mean, I knew that they were regulated differently, but it's not something. I don't think I've ever had any cases specifically with regard to dietary supplements. So I may have, but I can't think of them right now. If so, it was pretty far back.
Well, and we were just talking about McDonald's.
We were talking about McDonald's, and I have to say that our last podcast got a lot of attention. Specifically, I think because of the discussion we had about the McDonald's McNugget case.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people had a lot to say about that and kind of getting all worked up and comparing it back to the hot coffee case and that sort of thing. And so I did want to kind of jump back to it. I did a little bit more research on it just to see exactly what was going on. And a couple of things. One is, I think I had mentioned that the little girl was 7, and she's actually 7 now. At the time this happened, she was 4.
Wow. So this is a while ago.
Well, like 3, but by the time you get to trial,
Yeah.
I mean, that's not unusual that you would talk through, you'd be thinking 3 years. I mean, you can file a lawsuit within 2 years of the injury. Obviously, she did it sooner than that, to be already through the trial in, say, 3 years.
Yeah. Well, now I'm even more curious because you mentioned too that the McNuggets were handed directly to her. What parents are pulling up so the back door or the back window for a 4-year-old to grab the McNuggets, and then they always put it in the back or the Happy Meal thing. Who's given just the straight up box?
Yeah, well, in one of the articles I saw, it actually said that they handed it to the mother, and the mother just handed it to her. So I'm not quite sure if they actually handed it directly to the child or if the mother handed it to her. But again, it's a Happy Meal. It's directed toward children. I mean, as an adult, I ate some Happy Meals because I like to collect the toys back in the day when they had cool ones.
They did have some cool ones. That was my favorite part.
So and I think they're kind of like crappy, like cardboard things these days, aren't they?
Oh yeah, they've gone down for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they were collector's items for a while.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
I mean, they were some high quality stuff, and now it's just like shitty little pieces of paper usually.
Yeah, so no fun, but yeah. So I mean, it's intended, it's directed for a child, and then I was thinking too. I mean, when you are giving a child food, I mean, certainly when you were a kid, I mean, I would test something first, touch it, blow on it, that sort of thing before, just make sure that it was a regular temperature. It's not something, and as an adult, we might look at something, we look at some hot soup, we look at pizza, we know, well, shoot, if we're not careful, I mean, we want to test it a little bit before we just gulp, just take a big mouthful and burn,
Try to
burn
be
the
safe.
roof of our mouths. Yeah. But it is a little bit different when it's a child. And so the trial, it was a bifurcated trial, which is odd, and I'm not exactly sure why that happened, but the trial only addressed the issue of liability, whether they were responsible for the injuries, but it didn't address the damages. And there's going to be a second trial that's going to assess the amount of damages that should be awarded to the family. So we don't know what that will be yet. But what they found was that they held the franchise liable for negligence in basically the temperature that they served the food at and the failure to warn about how hot it was. And then the franchisor, McDonald's USA, was liable for failing to provide instructions for safe handling of the food. So it sounds to me like there's not like a specific policy that McDonald's requires all their franchisees to adhere to with regard to how you serve the food and the temperature that you are passing it off to the consumer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would assume they have kind of like a rule book on how to cook the McNuggets and, what temperature to put it at and whatnot. But, once it comes out of the oil and they're packaging it and everything, I mean, it's kind of, the drive-thru's fast. Everyone wants to get their food fast. It's kind of hard to be like, oh, wait, hold on. We got to give this another 30 seconds to cool down before we serve it to them.
Yeah, but better 30 seconds than, than serious scarring on a child. One of there was actually a kind of an argument. I don't know if it was on our YouTube or TikTok. Anyway, a couple of people got into an argument about, hey, there's laws about how you can, the temperature that you have to serve food at. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with cookie dough, that if you don't have it at a certain temperature, then there is the risk of salmonella, E. coli, those sorts of things. And that temperature is 140 degrees is what's, you have to heat the food to that temperature for safety reasons. And in this case, the plaintiffs argued that the temperature that the McNugget was served at was over 200 degrees.
Jesus.
Right. Now, the defense said, no, it was 160. So 20 degrees over but 40 degrees less than what the plaintiffs are saying. And that probably, there wasn't details about exactly how they came to that.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming that they had experts look at, the injury to her thigh and what temperature would it take to cause that kind of, significant second-degree burn that would result in the scarring. So that was one of the issues, and it sounds to me like, again, we don't know the details on exactly what the jury decided, but they did find that they were negligent in the way that they served it. So presumably that it was hotter than that 140.
And you said they found not only the franchise liable, but also McDonald's as a whole because they didn't have instructions for the franchise on how to serve it and the safety precautions they should be taking.
Right. So different issues. So they found that the actual franchisee was negligent in the way that they served the food and the failure to warn. And then McDonald's, the franchisor, was negligent in failing to provide adequate instructions to all of their franchisees.
Yeah.
And I suspect that this is something that is going to probably change. I mean, it's simple enough to come up with a policy, a procedure, and then to share that and hopefully avoid injuries. Because again, I mean, this is one lawsuit, and the injury was significant enough that it became a lawsuit. Yeah. But how many people potentially have been burned, but they just didn't do anything about it, or it wasn't so bad that they had to go to the hospital? Back to that coffee case. I mean, there were skin grafts, all kind of stuff, and in this case, permanent scarring.
Yeah, and I mean, even from personal experience of going through the drive-through is sometimes when you're waiting there and you get fries. The fries, I mean, they're delicious. They're fantastic. My favorite fries. But those will come out piping hot. And I've definitely burned my tongue once or twice because, furiously, they're even better when they're hot. They once you get cool and a little, soggy, they're not good. So you really want to enjoy that hot moment. But they can come out piping hot.
Well, maybe you need to make sure that you dip them in ketchup because that will cool them down a little bit.
No. It ruins it. It ruins it. You got to enjoy
it's a crutch.
It is. It takes away from the flavor of the fry.
I know. I like my ketchup. And it's a safety issue, really.
Yeah, that's what they should have said. Why didn't you dip your McNuggets in ketchup before throwing them in your lap?
Or those sauces?
The sauces, they did. Sweet and sour is good. But you mentioned they found him liable, but the damages is going to be a completely different case.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why they broke it up, but they did. So now they have to put on only the damages case. And apparently, and again, some of the information is conflicting, but it sounds like what they were asking for was $15,000. So not millions and billions of dollars or something like that. And I don't know how that was broken down, but presumably there would be medical expenses, pain and suffering, potential lost time from work for the family to get her the medical care, and then something for there's the permanent scarring, that sort of situation.
It seems pretty low for all of those things that you mentioned. I mean, even just alone the medical costs of some serious burns like that, and then the pain and suffering, especially on the child, that has to be a little bit more than $15,000.
Yeah, I mean that's what they're saying that they had asked for. Again, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see. It'll be interesting when they do hold the damages portion of the trial, because again, people get really worked up over this because they're just so incensed about the whole coffee thing, which again, most people don't know all the details about it. And in that case, the woman asked for a very small amount too, and they would not pay just for her medical treatment, and then ultimately they ended up finding in favor of her and awarding punitive damages, and that's where you get into the crazy numbers, is where you have to punish a company that's so huge that $15,000 is nothing to them. I mean, they're just would throw that at you. I mean, to make them change their ways, it takes a whole lot more. So.
Yeah, and so when it comes to the damages case, I mean, I was kind of surprised as well that it wasn't in the same thing.
Yeah.
And so they'll be arguing, because it's already been decided that they're liable. So the defense are going to be kind of trying to get that as low as possible. Exactly. But I mean, $15,000 is already so low. How low can you get it?
Well, it's one of those things. They probably should have paid this, and this thing would have gone away a long time ago, but they didn't. But the good news about this, though, is that with that verdict where, the McDonald's was held responsible for not having these policies, it's going to make a change, and so had they just paid them off $15,000, they would have just kept doing it, and who knows how many other injuries there would be, and how big of an injury we'd have to finally make a change. And this is going to make the change. I mean, I can't speak for McDonald's, the CEO or whoever's making these calls, but I suspect they're going to come out with some policy.
Yeah.
And then pass it off to, again, the franchisees are now going to be on the hook if they don't follow the policy, but they can get out of it by setting one up.
That's what I was going to say. It must be kind of difficult when you have that many franchises, because McDonald's is a franchise business. Right. I think their mission is essentially owning the land. They're more of a real estate company.
Really? I don't know the insides of that.
Yeah, it was actually, if you watch The Founder, based on the founding of McDonald's.
Right. Okay.
Fantastic movie. But it talks about how, everyone was kind of so obsessed with owning all of the restaurants and then making as big as possible. And they really started the franchising. And so they would, buy the land, or if someone wanted to start a franchise, they would say, okay, we can do that, but we're going to, take the land that's going to be hosted on. Anyways, it must be kind of difficult to manage that many franchises, and I wonder if it's difficult to come up with safety precautions and try to make sure, I guess they just aren't liable, so don't care too much, but make sure that all of the franchises are following it.
Well, I think they are liable. This case is holding them liable for failure to have a certain policy. There's probably a lot of other policies. And usually with those franchisors, they have really specific and detailed and really long contracts about all of the things that the franchisees have to do. Mm-hmm. And so, this is just one more policy. But I'm sure they probably do have a policy that you have to serve the food at least, have to cook the food to at least 140 degrees. Again, for health reasons. Yeah. So maybe they just add on and, ensure that it drops, to whatever temperature before you serve it, and don't serve it at over the 140. Yeah. And perhaps there'll be some warning, who knows?
Well, and 200 degrees, like you said, which is what the plaintiffs were arguing, and then the defense was arguing 160, and you need 140 to cook it well enough. Yeah. 200 seems pretty absurd. That's high, but 160, the 20 degrees, even though that's a high number, it's hot. Trying to keep in mind as well, these are minimum wage employees that are being probably overworked and, not treated the best, and then trying to also make sure that they're keeping track of, 10, 15, 20 degrees. It's just kind of tough.
Well, I guess you just need good training, and maybe they need to pay them a little more.
I definitely agree with that. They deserve a little bit more, for sure. The fries are delicious. That alone deserves a higher paycheck.
I really think you seem to be the connoisseur of fast foods.
Yeah, well, with my extensive time on the road, I've had a good amount of experience, and then my laziness level also. When you don't feel like cooking,
it's fast.
Yeah, a few of my no-goes, Arby's. Never touch an Arby's. I haven't even been there in years. Carl's Jr., not a big fan. A lot of people say they like Wendy's. I think they have good curly fries. I'll get behind that, but not a big fan of the others. I think they got mini tacos, which I've heard is good. Huh. In-N-Out, number one, by far.
And the Chick-fil-A was up there for you?
Chick-fil-A is probably top 3. Yeah. Okay. That's just high quality. It's like arguably not fast food, even though it is, right? And it's like kind of like a Chipotle too. It's like, what do you call Chipotle fast food? I wouldn't. But
because you don't have a drive-through. I think if you don't have a drive-through. I've seen
a few Chipotles with drive-thrus.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they got a few in Phoenix.
Oh, wow. I just feel like if you don't have a drive-through, it's not fast food.
That's fair.
Like medium fast food.
That's fair. But In-N-Out, Chick-fil-A, those are my top 2 freshest, highest quality food on the road for sure.
What about Taco Bell?
Taco Bell is like one of my top options for late night, because they have 24-hour Taco Bells. And, got to be honest, the tacos are delicious, even though the meat is just muck.
It doesn't look like meat.
No, it's because it's not. It's powder, and they put water in, and they mix it, and that's what it is. But the Doritos Locos Tacos have some insane macros on them. It's like 12, 15, no, I think it's higher. I think it's in the 20s grams of protein and like 200, 300 calories each, which for fast food is not bad for a taco.
Okay, I had no idea. Yeah, actually Taco Bell was one of these things that I grew up on the East Coast, and we did not have Taco Bells. I'm assuming they're there now. But when I was actually in law school, I did a summer job in LA, and one of the most exciting things was the fact that they had Taco Bells all over the place. And I had all these pictures taken of me like at Taco Bell, and everybody back, East Coast was all jealous and excited about it. But they were different then too. I mean, it
Yeah.
was more. I think it was a higher quality. The meat looked like meat. It really looked like tacos.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think all fast food back then was just better. I mean,
Yeah.
it's as, population grows, as demand grows, and the speed, and there's more
trying
competition.
to get it cheaper.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Start
And then
cutting
compete
corners.
with all the others.
Well, Taco Bell's massive at ASU as well, because there's one right next to campus. It's across the street from dorms as well as some other living facilities. And so when it hits 2 a.m., and I think it's 24-hour, when it hits 2 a.m., all the bars close and everything, it is body to body in there. I mean, it is like almost an after party because it is just packed. And I feel terrible for the workers because they're dealing with a ton of drunk college students, just being belligerent. There's one time I went in there and I was living across the street. I think I was just lazy and getting food late at night. And as I was leaving, these two guys were talking shit to each other, and getting a little bit in each other's faces. But I just walked out. Next day, go on Instagram. There's Barstool ASU. Get all like the cool clips of going on at ASU. Same exact guys get in a massive fist fight. Like, It must have been minutes after I left, and just knocked one of the guys out, and it was just game over after that.
Wow.
Yeah, so dodged a bullet there. So that's the only cool Taco Bell story I really have, so I felt like I need to kind of throw it out there.
I don't know if it's cool or not. It's a little bit traumatic.
I don't know, it's interesting.
But you made it through college, and you weren't in any fist fights and
No.
Taco Bells to my knowledge. So
Not
all
that I
good.
can remember.
All good, yeah. All right. Well, that was interesting. So the next thing up, actually, we always talk about a case that we're actively involved in and what's happening with that and give a little background on it. And what I wanted to talk about this week is hernia mesh cases. And we actually talked about this. Unfortunately, it was one of the podcasts that we did before I left the country. And somehow the file was corrupted and the whole thing never made it to you guys. So, but it is a really important litigation, and so I wanted to kind of go back over that, actually for the first time for all of our listeners. So hernia mesh cases, like I said, it's a big deal right now because there are some of the cases are in the process, have settled and are in the process of settling. And there are a number of different products that are involved, but they're all meshes that are used to surgically repair hernias. And when we talked about this before, I don't know if you remember all your questions, but hernias are basically where an internal organ or other body part is protruding through the muscle wall or tissue. Usually you'll see them abdominal, groin area, or lower abdomen.
Yeah, I feel like the go-to is like the massive belly button. I know Ron Jeremy was one of those guys, and he had he's already a big old hairy guy, but then he has a massive belly button. It's like it wasn't any, but now it's just a massive ball and outie.
So, has he not had anything done about it? He just walks around with a big old hernia?
I think so. I haven't kept up with it, but that's kind of like where my mind goes, is that was the most like protrudent one that I noticed.
Oh, well, maybe Fernie can find a picture. I don't know who this is or...
Definitely.
So it'd be an interesting example. Maybe I'll have to use that in my marketing. I don't know.
No, you don't. You don't want to use
it's
this
not good.
guy.
Okay. Anyway, so it's a really, really common problem, and millions of people have this problem, and so they do go in, and now the quick, easy surgical repair is using the mesh. Mm-hmm. So as these products degrade in the body, they can cause a lot of symptoms. They can cause like chronic pain, infections, intestinal obstructions, fistulas, even organ perforation.
Jesus.
Yeah, and these are really, really bad problems. A number of people end up getting horrible infections, can go septic, a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so just some really horrible injuries. And, these companies have known that there's a problem with this product. And, one of as I was doing some background on this, came up with a quote from a plastics engineer. This was originally on 60 Minutes, where he says, and this is a quote, "I can't in my wildest imagination imagine anybody that's knowledgeable in the science of plastics ever deciding that it was appropriate to use polypropylene in the human body. It's well known that it's oxidatively unstable."
That's insane.
Right.
I mean, and like you said, there's already issues with meshes, and when there's something that goes into your body, it's going to be in there a long time. It's there to fix an issue, which hernias, to my knowledge, usually aren't super bad. It's more of like a kind of a cosmetic surgery, and
Well, it can be very painful.
yeah, definitely painful, but not like a, fatal type of
Life or death. It's
yeah.
generally not until you get it repaired, and then it's life or death.
Well, and that's the most insane part is that, first of all, these meshes that are going to your body, so you have to assume that they're going to be in there. And if they just so happen to break up and start deteriorating, worst case, you got to be prepared for that. And the chemicals and the, material that you use to make it shouldn't be causing death.
Yeah, I mean, it basically, as it breaks down, it behaves as toxic substances in your body. And the problem here, well, there's lots of problems here, but one of the problems here is that these things are still being implanted. A couple have been recalled, very specific ones, but generally these polypropylene meshes are being used every day, thousands and thousands of times a day. There's millions of these out there. And the different brands are slightly different. I mean, they may, the strength of the materials that they use, how tight the mesh is. There's different things that make some of them a little bit worse than others, but any of the polypropylene ones can be a big problem. And these cases have been, we've been litigating these for like 5 years now, I think it is.
And so it's I don't know, I know I'm not going to pronounce this, the polypropylene. Propylene.
Close.
But not all of them have that material in it.
Right. Most of them do. You can have different kinds of meshes. You can have biologic, and so some of them they use bovine or porcine tissue, so basically cows or pigs.
Yeah.
And then there's also some human, they call it humidermis. So there's also, it's not all synthetic materials. And then also, you can repair a hernia without adding any product. I mean, it's a more complicated surgery, and you have to go in and basically put the, you're like, look at the face, okay.
It's making me cringe.
Yeah, well, basically you're sewing the tissue together to cover it up. So it's not as much of a quick fix.
Yeah, and that was kind of another one of my questions is how is the hernia mesh actually helping the hernia? Like, is it just a material that you put over it and it pushes down the protruding organ?
Basically, yeah.
And that's it? Wow, okay.
Yeah. And so it's a quicker, easier fix.
Sounds like
although
it.
quite expensive because these things cost a whole lot of money, which is really good for the companies. And they're, making a ton of money on this. And so they're not, these, as I said, there are a couple that have been recalled, but most of them are not recalled. They're still implanting them regularly. And generally there's a delay between when you've had the surgery implanting it and when you start really having the symptoms and the problems, and it can be several years.
Wow.
A lot of our clients, they had it, years ago, and it degrades, and that takes time. And so as it degrades, the different issues can start arising, and they're needing these additional surgeries. They're needing revision surgeries. Some people are just suffering from chronic pain where there's situations where they get in there and they're like, we cannot get this out. It's going to cause them more damage to remove it than to just basically leave it there. I mean, you get adhesions to organs, you get organ perforations. It's pretty traumatic cutting this stuff out when it's embedded into the various tissues and organs.
Yeah, and something that I immediately thought of as well is that hernias are one of those situations that it's not something that only happens to elderly people or like a majority.
Yeah.
I had a buddy that, in his 20s, he was lifting, and it's really big in the lifting scene is that people get hernias, and especially when they're doing a lot of deadlifting, heavy weights like that. it's super common. And so, there's people that are in their 20s, 30s getting this.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people who have very physical jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of, construction and anything where you're lifting heavy objects, you have a high risk of sustaining a hernia. Women, when they're pregnant, oftentimes have,
Really?
yeah, that's a big issue too. So again, like you said, it's not just older people, and it's millions of people. I mean, I don't even know like as far as like ranked how common it is, but it's got to be up there. Lots and lots of people who suffer from this, and now millions and millions of people who are suffering from the complications and needing other surgeries. Hence the multi-district litigations. There are several, and as I said, a couple of them have settled. The biggest one, which is barred, that one is still pending. There's a trial. Actually, the next trial is coming up October 15th on that. And we do expect that these cases are going to resolve. There probably will be a global settlement. And it's just really important that people not wait if they are having any types of problems. They can, even if the global settlement happens, they could file their case individually, of course, but unless their injuries are really horrendous, it's going to cost them so much to litigate against these companies. Whereas, if they jump into this multi-district litigation and can participate in a global settlement, they can reject the offer if they want to and take their case out to still litigate it individually. But at least they have the option of getting a resolution without actually them going to trial.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned some of these products have been recalled, but it sounds like not all of them, especially the one with that dangerous material in it, which is crazy to me because, I mean, like the quote that you said from the scientist or whoever, I don't know what his profession was, but I mean, it sounded plastic surgeon. Yeah, I mean, it sounds
plastics engineer, not surgeon.
Plastics engineer. Yeah, how he's saying that anyone that knows anything about plastics would never put this in the human body. So how is it that there are still products out there and being implemented that have this material?
Well, they're insisting, the companies are insisting that it's not a problem, and all of these, every product has a risk, and there's a very low risk, but this is not a very low risk, and ultimately, I think that the juries are finding that and holding them responsible, and hopefully it will be a situation. I don't think they're ever going to recall them, but hopefully it's going to be a situation more similar to, say, that transvaginal mesh, where before doctors were just implanting them right and left. I mean, that was just what they automatically recommended, and now they're much more hesitant, and they've warned the women about all of the risks, and so they're just not used as much. And I'm hoping that that's going to be the case with the polypropylene meshes also. That people will be much more hesitant. They won't just be getting them right and left.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a wide variety of issues that this can cause. I mean, it's from, pain and discomfort to, insane infections and protruding of the organs, and then all the way up to death as well. Is there like kind of an area that's most common with where they'll get issues or how bad it will get?
Well, it really depends on the person and what happens. I mean, when you get a bowel perforation, that's really bad.
What is that?
Well, so that's where your bowel is basically it cuts into your bowel, and so your bowel can leak into your abdomen.
That sounds terrible.
Well, yeah, and so then you're at that point, those are causing just horrendous infections, and oftentimes people go septic and die. Yeah, I mean, that's not something you want to mess around with. But where you have a chronic pain, sometimes they can go in and actually take out the mesh and the scar tissue surrounding it, and that will improve your symptoms. And a lot of people do get some infections, and they're able to treat them either, IV antibiotics or, maybe even less serious. It just really depends on what type of problem you have.
Yeah.
We have a little canine activity here.
Causing a ruckus.
We got rid of 2 dogs and we have 1 dog.
Yeah, this one's a little smaller, so it's not as bad. But yeah, that is insane. I mean, these are some terrible issues that sounds like they're affecting such a wide variety of people. And something that you mentioned as well is that it's really common in these manual labor jobs where if this happens, and it's kind of part of working in that field, you get hernia mesh, and then you have other issues, and with how bad it sounds like it can get, it takes you out of work. I mean, it could really just mess up your entire lifestyle.
Well, it certainly takes you out of work, and then some people end up, permanently disabled and not able to go back to certainly that kind of job would involve a lot of physical labor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
And you said this has been going on for a while, about 5 years. I remember you've been talking about this for a long time. This is cases that we take as well.
Oh, yeah. This is really probably the thing that we get the most calls about right now. And again, I think that there is a push. A lot of people are trying to get the information out to people that, hey, time really is running out on these things. Mm-hmm. And, just talk to somebody, find out if you have, if you do have a case, you don't want to wait on it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a couple of issues. There's one issue, of course, is that the cases are settling, and if you want to be able to participate, you need to get involved before that settlement happens, because you can't come in later. But the other issue is just timing, that even if you want to file your own case, depending on the state that you live in, there's going to be a time frame, and it's usually going to run from when you knew or should have known that there was a problem with the product. So when you start having symptoms, again, those time frames start to run. They're different in different states. If you have questions about that, we can let you know what it is. But sooner than later, you want to see your doctor, tell your doctor that you're having these symptoms, and get that figured out, get the treatment you need, and definitely talk to an attorney if you want to pursue a case for damages.
And with how, terrible these issues can get, and knowing that, this type of material being in your body can cause these problems, I feel like it would be something that even if I wasn't having problems and I had hernia and I knew I got hernia mesh, I would want to know at least, is that the brand that is causing these problems, is that in me? Is that something I need to keep an eye out for, go to the doctor, keep just an eye on, so you don't let it get to those, terrible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, that kind of goes to another point, is that oftentimes, in any of these cases where you have, an implant, whether it's a mesh or, an artificial joint, people don't know what kind they have. Yeah. I mean, it's just they basically the doctor chooses. It's not like, you shop through a catalog and say, I like this one looks cool, or they don't know. And so if you want to know what product you have, you can contact your surgeon. Generally in your medical records, there's what's called like a sticker sheet.
Sticker, yeah. Every time they use a product, they put a sticker in your file.
Yeah. So now, and it used to be they would actually peel the sticker off of the box and stick it in the medical record. Now a lot of it is what do you say? Automatic is
online.
Is digital. It's going to show up in your medical record. But again, there that will always be in your medical records. The surgeon will have that information, so you can find out what you have and certainly research whether it's one of the products that has. And again, it's not just that it's been recalled, because only a couple of them have been recalled, but one of the products that's causing problems, and that we're pursuing these lawsuits.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's a pretty big case as well.
It is. I'm trying. There's like over 20,000 cases in the barred litigation, I think. And then there's again the other a bunch of other manufacturers as well. It's huge. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always love getting questions. I think it's always super interesting, and so every time I see it on the sheet, I get excited.
You got excited. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and this is a good question. And I think it kind of came up, partly with regard to the McDonald's case, but then we've had similar questions in the past too. And it kind of, there were a couple of comments. One was, do companies have to warn about every stupid thing people might do? And why should people be able to sue for doing stupid stuff? Basically the things. And it's actually a good question. It is a really good question, and sometimes what you hear in the news, again, and you can probably attest to this, is not exactly accurate, and there might be exaggerations and that sort of thing. But I did want to just kind of talk about what the legal standard is for product cases. And, when in law school, they taught us about the reasonable man standard, which now is the reasonable person standard, finally. And basically, that's just that when you're looking at these cases and whether somebody should be able to bring a lawsuit, or basically the jury's going to ask this, did this person act the way that a reasonable person would act, say, in using this product? And if somebody is not reasonable, then their case is not going to be successful. In one of the the questions that you ask is this injury, say, reasonably foreseeable? Can you see that this product could be used in this way and cause harm to somebody?
Something that wouldn't apply would probably be the Tide Pod challenge that I mentioned last show.
Okay, that, I would say
People
that
throwing detergent pods in their mouth and just popping them open. I think that's not reasonable.
No, that is not a reasonable use of the product. And that's actually a much more colorful example, because the example that you often use in law school is, that you have a chair and the chair is supposed to be used for sitting, but somebody notices that the light bulb in their ceiling is out, so they stand on the chair to change the light bulb and the chair collapses and they're injured. Can they sue the manufacturer of the chair? And then the issue would be, well, is it reasonable to assume somebody's going to stand on the chair? And if it is reasonable to assume that they will, so again, if the use is foreseeable, then you have to warn about it. If it's something that's just so crazy that it's unforeseeable, then of course you don't have to warn about it.
Well, that chair situation, which way is it? Because I feel like I could usually assume, you're going to stand in your chair at some point. I mean, but at the same time, chairs are meant for sitting. So
exactly. Well, and that would be up to the jury. They would decide, is this reasonable? Mm-hmm. And if it is reasonably foreseeable, should they have warned about it? So basically you have to use the product for its intended use. Things like, you don't use a chainsaw to trim your nails, right? I mean, you can't,
That's a good example. Very colorful.
That could be really, really ugly and nasty colorful, huh? When I was kind of looking up examples, there were some kind of funny ones, and you always see memes on this, where like an iron has a warning on the box saying, "Do not iron clothing on body."
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, so they actually have that warning on there.
Yeah.
And I guess that it is foreseeable that somebody's going to try to iron something.
I mean, I guess, you put on your button up and get ready for work. You realize that it's got
there's a wrinkle.
A few wrinkles, and you're like, you don't have time to take it off and put it on the thing. And let me just do, one to the other, skip a step real quick.
Well, and I actually will admit that I've actually used a curling iron on a blouse just while it was...
I feel like that's almost worse, because at least the iron is meant for it.
It got out a little, just little wrinkles. But then, there's another one where microwaves do not use for drying pets.
Okay, that is sick.
But there were cases, situations, I'm not saying it was a lawsuit, but I mean, where people thought that it was okay to put a pet in
that's
there.
a situation where it's like, that's not reasonable at
No,
all.
oh my God. And it's just horrifying.
Awful.
It's completely horrifying. This is one, I actually have seen this, the sun shields that you put up in your car, and it says, "Do not drive with sun shield in place." They actually say that.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, it gets pretty hot in Arizona on a summer day. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming to have that sun bearing on you.
Just might want to go the first couple miles of it.
Just until your car cools down, and then you'll take it down.
Yeah. Well, and then another funny one I liked was on the thermometer. Once used rectally, thermometer should not be used orally.
Yeah,
Talking about E. coli and all kinds of nastiness.
That makes sense. I mean, I guess that's reasonable, know?
Oh, and one that I see all the time, and I'm sure that it's on there because it was a problem, is like with blow dryers. Mm-hmm. They always have that thing, and it's actually something you can't even remove. It's on like the cord, and it says, "Do not use in the bathtub." So I bet you there were probably a lot of situations where people tried to blow dry their hair in the bathtub and got electrocuted.
In the bathtub? That's interesting.
Well, because you can't have it near water.
Well,
electricity and water.
Well, I'm just thinking about like trying to dry off parts of your body when you're sitting in a pool of water.
Well, you're blowing your hair, presumably.
Well, yeah, you're blowing your hair, but you're sitting in a pool of water.
It's really bad.
You have high risk of getting it wet again, and then it defeats the entire purpose.
Okay, yeah. Just a really bad idea. But again, probably, I guess at some point, maybe they decided that it was reasonably foreseeable that somebody would do that, and that's why they have the warnings on there now.
Well, and I guess that's another question are all the warnings because someone has done something, or is it something that usually the company tries to think out in advance?
Well, I think that they do try to think in advance of, what things, what would be reasonably foreseeable that somebody might use their product in a way that they hadn't intended it to be used, and to avoid a lawsuit, then they would place a warning.
Yeah, I know with a lot of toys, like Play-Doh, it says don't eat.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, that's the good thing they put it there.
Yeah, it smells really good.
It smells delicious. Sometimes if you make something that looks really good too, and the texture as well, you're just a little curious. You know, what if I took a bite out of this? Would it be good? It looks good.
All right, just a minute. Did you eat Play-Doh?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I mean, I made it here if I did.
Well, so on another one of these rabbit holes that I got myself down, I was thinking about, products and using them, not for their intended purposes and everything. And I kind of go back to this classic case that I would always joke around about, and this is like the vacuum cleaner case. And I don't know if I've told you this or not, but I was starting to wonder if it was an urban legend, but in fact, I've confirmed that it is not. But so vacuum cleaners, within the hose part, they used to have like a little fan, and that would help kind of suck up the dust and debris or whatever, since it was closer to the end. Well, unfortunately, a number of men decided.
I knew this is where it was
This
going.
is where it was going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad it's not urban legend because that would have been disappointing. This sounds very realistic.
No, it's really real. I mean, actually, I didn't even know how real it was. But so the problem with having that little fan there, and then men put their penises in there, and so then there was some havoc.
A havoc's a nice way to say it, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so a lot of them don't have the fan there, but still, I thought, well, again, I researched this, and it was crazy because PubMed, I mean, this is like, this is the resource that doctors go to for studies and all. And in fact, the first article that popped up was vacuum cleaner injury to penis, a common neurologic problem. I mean, it's like, it happens enough that there were a number of articles that people, had wrote about this.
Yeah.
And so I guess that then goes to maybe this is foreseeable.
Yeah.
Again, I initially thought, well, this is the perfect example. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
But no, if it happens enough, then it is reasonably foreseeable. And so I don't know. Actually, I should go check my vacuum cleaner and see if it specifically says do not insert penis.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably not say penis. I feel like it would say, like, don't insert bodily.
Maybe you shouldn't be so specific because really you shouldn't insert your finger either.
Yeah, exactly. But that is kind of interesting where, if it happens enough, even though it sounds so ridiculous, if it happens enough, then it almost, is reasonable for someone to do it, I guess.
Well, it's a sign that there's a lot, either there's a whole lot of unreasonable people, and then maybe that crosses over into the line where it's reasonable. But, a man putting, something that sucks, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's...
I don't know. No comment.
Well, so, and I just have to say that when I was talking to Peter about this, I was like, the thing that always amazed me was that you would see in these medical records, like the stories that people would come up with to explain how it happened. And just in this one study, they were talking about, this guy saying that, he was vacuuming naked.
Tripped and fell and all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, stuff like that. And then the one was, let's see, vacuuming nude while his wife was out shopping. I mean, why would he even mention that his wife wasn't there?
Guys, my wife wasn't there. I know what you're probably thinking.
It turned itself on and caught his penis. I mean, it's like, so there's some real issues here because this
He's
thing
taking a nap, butt naked. He wakes up, cold sweats. All of a sudden, it's right there next to him, attacks him. It turns on by itself.
Oh, gosh. Well, another one, a guy who was a railway signalman, it was in his signal box when he bent down to pick up his tools and caught his penis in a Hoover dustette, which happened to be switched on.
Just so happened, coincidentally.
Yeah, and another guy vacuuming his friend's staircase in a loose-fitting dressing gown. When intending to switch the machine off, he leaned across to reach the plug. At that moment, his dressing gown became undone. And
Came on. The button flew off at the exact moment.
And his penis was sucked into the vacuum cleaner.
Jeez, that's terrifying. I mean,
It's really dangerous.
yeah.
Anyway, but the funny thing that I was saying to Peter is like, when you have these patients, I mean, does it even matter like how it happened? I mean, the fact of the matter is this, you're injured, just treat the injury, because you always, I don't know. There was a party with with a bunch of kids, you and a bunch of your school friends, and somehow I ended up talking to a proctologist, was one of the parents, and was telling me like these crazy stories about people who would come in with things in their butts, and they would always have these, well, my wife left her hairspray can sitting on the sofa, and I sat down. I mean, no. I mean, you sat down naked, and this hairspray can just doesn't slide into your butt.
I wonder if they're like on the way to the hospital and they're like thinking in their head, they're sweating and they're like, shit, how am I gonna how am I going to explain this one? I got to get a good story ready. And they're just waiting for the doctor. Okay, so, what happened here? Boom, they got their story like the back of their hand. They've been thinking about it since the drive over.
I guess. But I mean, here's the reality. I mean, the emergency room doctor comes in, there's a can of hairspray in the guy's butt. I mean, the issue is just to get it out. I mean, who cares how it got there? Because
I would be curious. That's a privilege of being a doctor. You get to find out about this
the
stuff.
explanations.
Yeah. It's a curiosity, you can't resist.
I don't know. No. I think I'll stick with law.
Well, those are some good questions, and I think, like you said, it kind of speaks to a greater thing. The reasonable person, not man anymore, the reasonable person rule is interesting, and it's interesting especially because it can be interpreted in so many ways. The definition of reasonable is it's not concrete. It's not something you can say this is clearly reasonable.
Yeah, it's not clear cut, and that's why these cases go to trial, because the jury is going to have to decide, was it reasonable or was it not? The plaintiff is going to argue, of course it was reasonable that I did whatever I did. And so really the answer is that no, depending on how stupid somebody is, no, they don't have a case.
Yeah. Well, and something to keep in mind too is a lot of these cases, once it hits media, like the coffee, just a lot of the facts aren't always mentioned, and I mean it's easy to get people kind of worked up, and they get more views, clickbait.
Yeah, clickbait. I was going to say, this kind of goes full circle to you and your conspiracy theory about the news.
Exactly. I mean, they're looking to get as many views as possible and as, ridiculous as they can make the story
make it
sound.
Crazier than it really is.
Yeah, and even if it, requires maybe not lying, but, omitting some of the details of it.
Enhancing others and exaggerating. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, well, I think we covered a lot. Just one, as far as for next week, just a little teaser about what we're going to talk about. The U.S. Surgeon General issued a public advisory report last week on the risks of social media on young people. Came out, and it's a 19-page report, but basically saying that there's a profound risk of harm. And this goes along with the social media litigation that's been going on for a while. So I thought we would talk about that next week, since it's timely with this report, that actually is really supporting our position in that litigation.
That is interesting, and I think the social media cases overall is definitely an interesting topic.
Yeah.
It's something that I think hasn't really been tapped into. People are aware that there are issues, but it's one of those. It's really very hard to define and categorize.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah. So that's what we'll talk about next week.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and close out. Some fantastic questions. If anyone does have any other questions, feel free to comment on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, whatever platform you see this. But I was also thinking it might be good for them to email as well. I'm sure there might be some questions that people aren't the most comfortable having, putting on a public forum. And then we also have the Facebook chat.
Right. So any of those, and we'll just double check which of the, we'll definitely add in here the links on that. But I think either the info or podcast, we get both of those, and we're happy to answer questions. Yeah. Actually, that's really the fun parts, is answering the questions.
It is. But with that being said, I think we're ready to close out. Thank you everyone for listening. Back at it like we said last week. We'll be going every week again. I hope we see you next week, and hope you have a good week.
Have a great one. Bye.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.